Hello YouTube, Zigrat Labs here to do another small review. This is a Sony Vaio PCG-U101 or just a U101 series. This is part of the actual Sony U series. They made a couple of the different variations of this model from, I want to say, 2002 all the way up to about 2004. The model I have currently in front of me is the PCG-U101. This model is actually only came in Japan. You were only able to obtain this in Japan. I think the U3 series or the VGN-U50 were the first ones to be in the US, which actually have a different shape. This video is just going to briefly show you this model. This is actually one of my rarest models in my collection. It's a little beat up. And I'm also just going to explain that I'm probably not going to do a game demo on this. This is actually damaged. I'm looking to replace part of the main board or maybe the chip, and I'll explain that in just a bit in the video. But I will give you an overview of what the model looks like and then a brief overview of the internals. So now let's look at the overview of this model. So regarding the outside of the case, and I will bring my handy dandy VCR cassette. I'll kind of give you a preview of what that looks like. So here's a VCR cassette compared to that. So you can see it's not much wider than a VCR cassette, and excuse the battery. With the battery in, it's just as thick as the VCR cassette. I have the battery out right now, and I'll explain in just a minute why. So it is actually quite a bit smaller than my other model. So here's a Toshiba libretto, and you can see it's a good, I want to say it's about 1.5 inches shorter, and actually it's roughly the same width size and the same, almost the same height size. It is a lot lighter than the libretto and the actually Sony Vaio that I have, the other Sony Vaio Picturebook. Which makes this model unique. And this is also running a 4:3 screen as opposed to both the libretto and the Sony Vaio Picturebook, which were more of a wide screen. So for the outside, it's about 7 inches long, 5.5 inches wide, and about 1.3 inches tall. It weighs roughly around 1.9 to 2 pounds. So on the right side of this model, you'll notice there's actually a wireless off and on, or actually a switch. And this model did come with wireless. This is a late 2002 to 2003, so it's one of our newer versions of, and I collect old retro kind of gaming laptops and older models. So this is one of relatively newer in my collection. However, it's the most rare that I have, since it is only in Japan and they don't sell it here. But I really like this model. I wish it really did work. So on the other side, we have an Ethernet jack. It's about, I think it's a 10x100 Ethernet jack. You have a standard Sony Vaio 16-volt plug-in, so this can actually use the standard Vaio ones from, I think, from all the way up to 2010. They use the same kind of jack. On the back side, or on the rear side, you'll notice there's a vent for actually, so this actually does have active cooling, so it has a little fan in there. You have one USB slot. This is a USB 2.0 slot. This is where your battery kind of connects into, so I've actually taken the battery off, and I'll explain that in just a minute, and then your release mechanism. The left side, you do have a Pcmcia slot. It's also card bus, 32-bit. We'll take Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3. Then, this is kind of hidden, and I actually just kind of already undone it. You actually have a little slot for a proprietary US or display out, so that's where you hook up your display for VGA. You have the Sony iLink, which is basically the FireWire port. You also have this DC in or DC out, and I believe this is for, like, if you wanted to power, I want to say DVD players or a CD burner or something like that. If it needed additional power, I guess there's a plug that plugs into that. You also have an additional USB slot. On the bottom, the battery, I've actually ejected it already, so I'll show you what the battery looks like. The battery is actually kind of a little flat piece. It's not that heavy actually too. So this is the entire battery for it, and it's actually pretty easy to get replacements for this. I'm sure, and this battery actually does hold a charge, so that's quite nice. But when you take the battery off, you'll notice, of course, and again, you can knock yourself out to use this serial because it doesn't work anyway for the XP Home. You can upgrade the memory on it, which is right here, the expansion, and then right here it allows you to access the hard drive. Now, I'm not sure why they place this here, because even if you take this off, there's no way really to get to the hard drive. You actually got to take this whole panel and the whole thing apart to even access the drive. So I'm not quite sure why they actually added an access bay to get to the hard drive, even though you can't pull it out once it's done. So forward facing this model, let's go ahead and open it up here. I'll bring it closer here. So you also have an additional vent. You also have an SD reader. This model included an SD reader, SD card. Works just fine on this model. You have your 3.5 standard jack for headphones and your 3.5 for an additional mic. This does not have an onboard built-in mic. For the keyboard, it's actually an 84 button keyboard. It's not an 82. And the additional, you got some additional, again, if you look at it, it's Japanese. There's some Japanese characters that I'm not familiar with, but I think there's 2 additional buttons from the Japanese keyboard. But relatively, it's all in English, and you can actually still type on it and everything else if you import one of these models. The monitor, or the display, is a 7.1 inch, so measuring from this way, 7.1 inch XGA TFT active display with a maximum resolution for the display itself is 1024 by 768. Your trackball and the mouse is actually quite interesting too. It's kind of similar to the Libretto in my previous reviews. So your trackball is actually right here, and it doesn't, you know, to be honest, this doesn't really feel really nice to move a mouse around. And your buttons are right here. And I think they designed it so you can basically hold it like this and read it. I don't know why. There's a demo that shows the display moving around by rotating with these 2 buttons. So, and this is your arrow keys. So on the keyboard, if you notice, there's actually not a standard set of arrow keys. Your actual arrow keys are sitting right over here. You also additionally have 1 mono speaker, so again, very similar to the Libretto. You have 1 mono speaker here. It actually is quite loud. It actually does a fair decent job for the sound and everything else. And again, 2-button mouse, little tiny space bar. The keyboard, I want to say this is probably the worst keyboard out of my models that I have. It's not really easy to type on. It's actually okay if you wanted to kind of game, I guess, a little bit on it. But you know, for normal typing, I think it's good for maybe browsing and that. But it's not really good if you're going to type a long document on this model. So I'm going to do a real brief teardown guide. I'm not going to show you actually tearing down the machine, but I'm actually just going to show you the different components inside the main board and what the main board looks like. For the CPU, this is an Intel Mobile Celeron running at 600 megahertz. It is the Manus core, which is one of the first mobile M generations of the Celeron. Features MMX, SSE, and SSE2 instruction chipset. It's running basically on a 479M socket package. V-core is running at 1.3 volts. It has 512 kilobytes of L2 cache, and the front side bus is about 400 megahertz. For the chipset, this is a Northbridge Intel 82855GM or 855GM AGB chipset. Again, front side bus is 400 megahertz. The Southbridge chipset is an 82801DB, which is PCI. The AGP is running at 4X and is PCI 2.2 compliant. For the RAM, my model actually has 256 megabytes of DDR 2100 memory running at 266 megahertz. Normally these models come with, I think, 128. The official, I think, upgradable maximum memory you can have on these models is 512 megabytes of RAM. For the video card, and this is, I think, very unique for how small this model is, it actually has an ATI Radeon Mobility M6 running at 144 megahertz on an HEP4X bus. It features 16 megabytes of DDR dedicated memory, so it's not shared at all. It's actually dedicated memory to this video card. It supports, again, DirectX 7, hardware acceleration, and 3D acceleration support, but there is no TNL available on the M6. And I think the M7 doesn't also have the TNL. I think the Radeon 7500 mobility and onward actually are the first models to actually have Transform and Lightning, or TNL. This does have MPEG playback acceleration and is able to drive a monitor, an external monitor at 1600 by 1200 at 16 million colors. So this model for the sound actually has a Yamaha ACXG or AC97 sound card. So this is basically, the sound card's a little bit newer than the Sony Vaio Picturebook, which featured a DS-XG. There's really no, but the difference is there's really no driver support or DOS driver support for this model. It does have a high performance audio controller on a PCI bus. Features two separate blocks. It does have some legacy audio blocks. It does have the regular PCIe block, which is the AC97. Supports direct sound, hardware acceleration, FM synthesizer, of course, the MPU 401, and it does have some joystick functionality within Windows. The U101 only has a mono speaker, but it does have full support for stereo. For the hard drive, this actually has a Toshiba 1.8-inch 30 gigabyte drive running at 4200 RPMs. It's actually a very, it's way smaller than a 2.5. It's very unique looking, but this drive is an ATA 100 with 512 kilobytes of buffer, so that's a little cache it has in it. The current drive that's in my model right now is actually a 60 gigabyte, which was taken from my Toshiba Libretto U105. Works just the same. The hard drives are very similar to what's in actual Apple iPods. The first generations and second generations are actually, the drives are very, very similar. For the Pcmcia, this is also a Ricoh R5C551, which is basically the newer version of what the Picturebook has. Basically, the card bus is on a PCI bus. Also supports the iLink 1394 and FireWire 400. What's different about this is actually has built-in cache on with the controller, as opposed to having a separate block of memory for it. So for the BIOS, it's a Phoenix BIOS. BIOS is made by ST. What's really unique about the BIOS that I like about this model, again, I really wish everything worked 100%, because I think this would have been a really good machine for retro gaming. It actually has the LCD screen expansion, which allows the screen to stretch. So when you play old 320 by 200 DOS games, it's not a really small box. It'll actually stretch the screen natively. Now, again, I've heard, I understand the mixed reviews. It's not the way sometimes to play the DOS games. It looks kind of funky. To me, on a small screen like this, it doesn't really matter. And I think it's a really nice feature and a really good characteristic that this actual BIOS supports that. Now with this model, there's actually, I've been trying to do some research here. I haven't actually found any type of expansion slots or anything like that you can use to expand. Maybe I think there's a actually the Sony Pcmcia card that I have for the other Picturebook actually works on this model and actually boots off on that. Same with the USB floppy drive. So I imagine those Sony peripherals work just fine for these models, but there's actually not a dock or anything like that. Just like the Picturebook, there's nothing you can sit this thing on to expand the IOs or any of the expansion ports for this model. So you're kind of stuck with what you have. Now, with this model that I currently have, I mentioned earlier that I probably won't be doing any game demos on this video just because this model is actually damaged. Now, in terms of damage, it looks okay. I mean, it's a little beat up and everything else, and I actually got it very, very cheaply. I'm lucky to get it. I was hoping to rescue it, which I've done. So when I received this model, it actually didn't boot at all, didn't run, didn't do anything. So I actually kind of, I want to say, I reflowed the main board, and that used really loosely. Reflowed, there's a couple different ways of doing that. I don't have a special, the specialty tool to actually reflow it correctly. So what I've done is I took the whole thing apart and took the main board out, covered everything that I need to cover, and actually baked it in my oven just to see if that would kick it back on. I checked all the capacitors, everything looked fine. So it didn't have any blown capacitors. You know, like the LCD looked okay. Wires weren't frayed. So I thought something maybe was damaged or something flowed. And sure enough, as soon as I let it cool down and put everything back together, it turned on. But however, it looks like I want to see the video card is damaged. Now I can guarantee it's the video card, not the display. I've tried it with the display out, and it gives me the same funky things, and I'm going to show you in just a minute what that looks like. So I'll go ahead and turn it on here just to kind of give you a demo of what it's going to look like. So you can see it's kind of a little goofed up here. Let me move the camera a little bit closer. And I've tried looking at the wires on the display, and all the wires on the display are fine. I know it's not the display. I know it's not any of the wires going to the display. It looks like it is the video card. Now, as mentioned earlier, this video card is a ATI M6 or Radeon M6 with 16 megs of memory, which is, it's actually quite a good video card. I'm sure this would game a lot better than, and again, it has direct 3D support. So this would game a hell of a lot better than both my Libretto and my Sony Vaio picture book. And it's running it's running an Celeron, but it's running basically a Pentium M Celeron version of it, which I think is just a little bit less cache, and it's running at 600 megahertz. So as you see, I've actually put XP on here. I didn't put any Windows 98. I usually try to find models, as you guys know, that can run Windows 98 because I'm looking for the kind of the ultimate retro gaming model. But it does run, and I've been able to install a fresh version of XP on here. I've actually put a newer hard drive in it. It runs pretty quickly. It only has 256 megs of RAM. I don't plan to really upgrade this model. I really don't plan to do anything with this model. As you say, it is damaged. I definitely need a new main board for it. But other than that, just running just to see the specifications and teardown and everything else, and seeing this model and how rare it is to find, I thought that was pretty neat. So anyway, guys, hope you enjoy the video. We'll probably do another video shortly. Thanks. Bye.